Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to a new second secondary lesson for today. And your book is The Traveler 3. And today we have some listening, reading, vocabulary, and grammar. If we start with what we'll learn today, as you can see, we have 4 objectives. 1, practice listening to the dialogue about global warming. 2, practice reading and identifying expressions in a meaningful context. And then we have identified words easily confused. And finally, identify how to form conditional sentences, especially types 1 and 2. So for number 1, we're going to talk about global warming. We have some listening, and I hope you prepare your headphones. For number 2, we're going to read and use some expressions in meaningful context. And also for 3, we'll have to identify some words easily confused, like work, job, hot, warm. And finally, in grammar, we'll talk about conditional sentences for all the types 0 to 3. If we take a look at this picture, we have planet Earth, and there is a storm, a rainstorm coming here, a hurricane, fires, and all of this. This is all come through the global warming, which we're going to talk about today. So the question is here for you: what do you know about the global warming? We know too much about the global warming, and you just saw the text we're going to listen to. The global warming is the rise of temperature every year. Many people, many scientists think that global warming is caused by using pesticides, also using gases, factory smoke, pollution. All of these are causing the rise of temperature around the world. If this continues for the future, this may result in too many disasters. So as you can see here, I'm going to play for you some listening, and I hope you get ready. Okay, you're going to listen to the dialogue while you read. What are the advantages and the disadvantages of the global warming? So again, we have just seen this photo of the global warming, and now we're going to listen about it here. Okay, you have the reading, and now you listen. Okay, so another one. Get your headphones ready. Okay, so these are the text, and if we play for you this now, you have Josh, Ben are listening to this in 2 parts. These are the 2 parts. You're going to listen to the dialogue while you read. Then you're going to see what are the advantages to global warming. What advantages the global warming does Josh mention. After this, we're not going to have true false. We're going to have some questions. And it's all about here. It's about the global warming here. So let's get started and play this for you.
4A. Listening and reading. B. Listen to the dialogue. What advantages to global warming does Josh mention?
You know, I don't see what the fuss is all about. Personally, I hate cold weather. Global warming means I can go swimming all year round. So for all I care, let it get warmer and warmer.
Are you totally insane, Josh? Haven't you understood a word of what scientists have been saying? If the temperature keeps rising, the polar ice caps will melt. As a result, sea levels will rise, causing massive flooding. And yes, you will be able to go swimming all year round, in your back garden.
Nonsense! So what? Some towns that are miles away from the sea will become beach resorts. Isn't that wonderful? You see, your problem is that you keep focusing on the disadvantages. If you weren't so negative, you would be able to see all the advantages of global warming.
What advantages?
4.
And yes,
that are miles away from... Your problem is if you would be able to see all the advantages of global warming.
What advantages?
Well, for starters, if the weather gets even warmer, we will save a lot of money on winter clothes. No more hats, boots and heavy coats.
Don't you understand that people who live in southern regions would suffer from extreme heat?
I don't see what the big deal is. If it gets too hot for people living in the south, they will simply go to the north to cool off. I mean, we've been going south for years to get warm.
Yes, but...
Don't interrupt me. Now, if the polar ice caps were smaller in size, it would be easier to dig for oil in the Arctic, which would mean cheaper petrol for us. Think about how much more often we could use our cars. We could go for nice long drives in the countryside.
I give up. Josh, you are a hopeless case.
That was the listening part of two people fighting over the advantages and disadvantages of global warming. Josh really thinks in a very, very different way, and Ben is trying to convince him, and finally he gave up. Now, you've seen some of the words that are underlined, like for all I care, some, so what, and also for starters, I give up, and hopeless case. We'll talk about these later. Now, let's answer some of the questions about the listening. Now, we just read the dialogue and listened to the dialogue. Now we're going to answer the questions below. I'm going to read for you the answers from 1 to 5. 1. What does Ben mean when he tells Josh that he will be able to swim in his back garden? He told him that if the weather keeps on, warming up, so polar ice, will really melt and cause too much flood, and this flood will reach his house, so he can swim anywhere if he cares about swimming. And for number 2, how does Ben see things according to Josh? And 3, how would Josh save money if the earth temperature rose? 4, how will people living in southern regions deal with extreme heat according to Josh? And finally, 5, what does Josh say could happen to the price of petrol if global warming continued? So for number 1, Josh really has his own different views about it. For number 1, Josh think about, Ben, when he told Josh about he's going to swim in his garden or back garden, that means that a lot of cities will also, have floods along with the one they both live in. So it means water will come to their houses and they can swim inside their houses. For number 2, how does Ben see things according to Josh? Well, Josh thinks that Ben is a negative person and he only sees disadvantages to everything. And for 3, how would Josh save money if the earth temperature rose? For Josh, he wouldn't have to buy heavy winter clothes. And for 4, how will people living in southern regions deal with extreme heat according to Josh? So according to Josh, they will have to move to the north to cool off. And finally, for 5, what does Josh say could happen to the price of petrol if global warming continued? He thinks that the price of petrol will go down because they'll be able to dig and find new sources of oil under polar, ice in the earth. So here are the answers for 1 through 5. And now if we jump off to the words that we just talked about in the, listening or in the reading part, we had some underlined words in red, which are I give up, so what, a hopeless case, for all that I care, or for all that I care, for starters. And here are their meanings from 1 to 5. So look at the expressions that are right, underlined in a dialogue and decide when each of them is used. So 1, when something is not important, what do we say? I give up, so what, a hopeless case, for all I care, for starters. And 2, when someone is not worried, he's what? He gave up, so what? A hopeless case, for all that he cares, or for all the starters. And 3, when there's no possibility of changing someone. And 4, when someone mentions the first point in a list. And 5, when someone can't do something and stops trying. So for number 1, we think that number 1, when something is not important, and you say, so what? So what? It's not important. And for number 2, when someone is not worried, it means for all that he cares. And for 3, when there's no possibility of changing someone, you tell him he is a hopeless case like Josh. And 4, when someone mentions the first point in a list. For starters, that's what he means, for starters here. And finally, of course, when someone can't do something and stops trying, you say, I give up. Like Ben when he gave up on Josh because he was a hopeless case. So here are the answers. When something is not important, we say, okay, so what? When someone is not worried, we say, for all that I care, or for all I care. 3, when there's no possibility of changing someone, and you say, this someone is a hopeless case. And 4, when someone mentions the first point in a list, you say, for starters, or for starters. 5, when someone can't do something and stops trying, and he gives up, and you say, I give up, I stop. I'm not going to do this anymore. Now, also we have some words that are, or some vocabulary that are, their meanings are confusing. So we're going to circle the word or the phrase that best completes each sentence according to the meaning. You know, too many people cannot really draw the difference between work, job, profession, career. They almost all have the same meaning, but still we can differentiate their meanings through the context and through using the dictionary. So we have to choose. Saudi Arabia is one of the world's leading oil producers or petrol producers. We have to check the dictionary and we have to see the meaning in a context here to decide whether oil is best answer here or petrol is best answer here. 2, remind me to stop at the first oil station we find or petrol station we find. 3, the lion lay down and sunned itself in the hot sunshine or in the warm sunshine. What is the difference between warm and hot? And also the food was too hot or too warm to eat, so we left it to cool down. And for 5, don't give up or don't give in on your dreams. Keep on trying until you succeed. Finally, for 6, finally the teacher gave up or gave in to the students' request to go on an excursion. So let's do number 1. Saudi Arabia is one of the world's leading oil producers. And 2, remind me to stop at the first petrol station. And for 3, the lion lay down and sunned itself in the warm sunshine. And 4, the food was hot or too hot to eat, so we left it to cool down. And for 5, don't give up on your dreams. Don't surrender on your dreams. Keep on trying until you succeed. And finally, the teacher gave in to the students' request to go on an excursions. And here are the answers. Underline. For 1, we say the leading oil producer. 2, at first petrol station. 3, in the warm sunshine. 4, the food was too hot. 5, don't give up on your dreams. And for 6, the teacher gave in to the students, so request that they can go on an excursion. Now let's go to grammar, and this is our final objective for today, and we'll talk about if, the conditionals. So we have 4 conditionals in English. We have the 0 conditional, we have first conditional, second and third conditional. Each one of them we use it to talk about a certain condition, a certain way. For the 0 condition, here is an example. If you stand in the rain, what's going to happen? Okay, if you start a sentence with if, that's the first part of, we call it the if clause, and there should be here, as you can see, sorry for that, you can see here the apostrophe. So if you stand in the rain, apostrophe, you, or a comma, if you stand in a rain, comma, you get wet. There is no will for the 0 condition because it's a fact. Also, another example, if you heat ice, okay, comma, it melts. Of course, put ice on fire, what's going to happen? It melts. So the first part that starts with the if, it starts with the simple present tense. If you stand, if you go, if you play, if you whatever you do in the present simple. The second part is in the present simple too. If you stand, you get. If you heat, it melts. So when do we use the zero conditional? We use this for facts which are generally true or scientific facts. The condition always has the same result. Everywhere, every time, anyway, anyhow. If you take ice and put it on fire, it melts. This is a fact. This is about science. And the result is always the same. Any kind of ice, put it any kind of fire, it melts. Anyway, you go stand in the rain, you get wet. You get wet. The second one, which is the first conditional, if it rains, comma, we will cancel the trip. If you study, you will pass the exam. And the two parts, the first part with the if is present simple, just like the zero conditional. But the second part of the if, which we call it the answer, will or will not, negative or positive, and a verb in the present. So you have present here, will, present. Here you have present, present. First conditional you have simple present, will, simple present. And we use it when you have a possible situation in the future, trying to predict a likely result in the future, and if the conditional happens. So if it rains, and this is going to be maybe after 10 minutes, 10 hours tomorrow, you are trying to predict something in the future. So what's going to happen if it rains? We will cancel the trip. This is the answer. If you study, what's going to happen? You will pass the exam. So you have will cancel, will pass, this is present, and here you have present. For the second conditional, if I won the lottery, and here you have simple past, won in the past of win. If I won the lottery, I would travel a lot. If they sold their house, they would be rich. So the first part of the F conditional, you have the first F clause part, which is the past simple. If I went, if you played, if I watched, if you wrote. So you have simple past. And the second part, you have would and present. Would go, would see, would be, would watch, would eat, and so on. And we use it in hypothetical or unlikely situations, unreal or improbable situation now or in the future. Okay? For unlikely or unreal situations in the future. And the third conditional, we have past perfect, which is had and past participle. If you had studied, what is the answer? You would have passed the exam. Now this is a very long grammar for you. So if third conditional, for the if clause, you start with a past perfect. If you had studied, if you had gone, if you had made, if you had written. And in the answer on the second part, you will have would and have, always, would have, always, and another past participle, which is had and past participle. So, if you had studied, you have past participle. In the second part, would have, always, and past participle, which is would have, past participle. Okay? Would have passed, would have gone, would have read, would have watched, etc. And we use the third conditional when a person is imagining a different past. Imaginary situations that did not happen. Something about your imagination. So you're imagining something that did not happen. If you had studied, you would have passed the exam, but it's too late now. You did not study, you failed, but now we are trying to imagine if we go back to the past, if you had studied, what would have happened? If you had studied, you would have passed the exam. Now let's do the final assessment for today, and we complete the dialogues with the correct form of the verb in brackets. So we have verbs in red in brackets. We need to change them. Another conversation or dialogue. Paul, hi Jack, what are you up to? Jack, I'm just doing some research about climate change. Did you know that if the planet continued to get warmer, the polar ice caps will melt? Paul, I guess that's obvious. After all, if you heat ice, it melt. Jack, I bet you don't know what causes climate change. Paul, I know that burning fossil fuels increases the planet's temperature. Jack, that's right. And if we not use alternative sources of energy more, we destroy the planet. If people think about the environment more, they find ways to make things better. So for number one, Jack, I'm just doing some research about climate change. Did you know, this is a question, that if the planet, the polar will melt. So if you have will here in the present, the verb should be present here. Will, present. So if the planet continues to get warmer, the polar ice will melt. So if the planet continues to get warmer, the polar ice will melt. This is conditional, F conditional 1. I guess that's obvious. After all, if you have if here, heat ice, it, this is 0 conditional. So if you heat ice, it melts. If you heat ice, it melts. And that is a scientific fact. So if you heat ice, it melts. And for Jack, that is right. And if we not use alternative resources of energy, we destroy the planet. So if we don't use alternative sources of energy, we will destroy the planet. We will destroy the planet. And this is F1 again. If we don't use, we will not, or we won't destroy the planet. If people think about the environment more, so we change it here. If the people thought about the environment more, they would find ways to make things better. So if we have here, if people thought about the environment, they would find. And if we keep it, if people think about the environment, they will find ways to make things better. And both is correct. If you can say, if you use it in 0 conditional 2, if people thought about the environment more, they would find. And if you say, if people think about the environment more, they will find some ways to make things better. And here are the answers for you. And finally, what we have learned today, we talked first about some expressions that we can use, like you give up. It's like you surrender. So what when something is not very important? A hopeless case. Someone you cannot change his mind. For all I care, and for starters. And also we had a bunch of words that easily confuse, so we don't know their meanings exactly, like oil and petrol, hot and warm, give up and give in. And we just finished talking about if conditionals in 4 conditionals: the 0 conditional, present and present. If you stand, you get wet. And the first conditional, which is present and will, and a verb. If it rains, you will cancel. If you study, you will pass. And for the second conditional, if I won, you have simple past, and then you have would and a present. If I won, I would travel. If they sold, they would be rich. And the third conditional, which is we have past perfect, and the second part we have would have and past participle. If you had studied, would have passed the exam. If I hadn't been sick, I would have gone to your party. That was all for today. These are some references and resources for you to check out. And you can visit us on our website, follow us on Twitter, call us if you have any technical problem for more information and lessons. Thank you all for watching this. Hope I catch you again. Until then, have a good day and Assalamu alaikum.